Here we have two Rolex GMTs. The one on the right is a Batman from 2015, no box, no papers, for $22,000. The one on the left is the new Batgirl from 2022 with box and papers for $17,000. Now you may be wondering, why does one watch that is 7 years older cost $5,000 more? And the reason why is because it's part of the Rolex CPO program. And here today, we're going to talk about whether it makes sense to go through the Rolex CPO program or whether you should go gray market, whether you should go older, whether you should go newer. First and foremost, Rolex has to be one of the most prestigious brands out there. The reason why Rolex CPO first came out was for Rolex to get their hand on the gray market. That way they can make a little bit of profit on the side. At the end of the day, business is business, and this is the reason why they're doing it. I believe Rolex may have gotten tired of seeing watches on the gray market, and although they do want their fair share in the market, their Rolex CPO program is not something to be worthwhile about. In the beginning, when Rolex first took out the CPO program, there was a lot of issues with getting inventory in the first place. And over time, it actually did alleviate a lot of that stress. We're starting to see Rolex Daytonas, we're starting to see Day Dates, we're starting to see Submariners, some of these better models in the CPO program. But the issue is still that these prices are still ridiculous. When comparing a Rolex CPO Day Date or Submariner, whatever it may be, to an actual gray market dealer, they're still upcharging it an X amount, whether it's a Rolex Day Date that's upcharged $5,000 or another Submariner or Daytona being upcharged another $4,000. On average, I would say these markups are around the 10 to 15% range. Some of these markups go as high as 30%, 40% for the model that you can get on the gray market for way cheaper. Now, at the end of the day, the Rolex CPO program is something that could be a viable option for somebody if the price is right. Number two, if they care about Rolex getting their hands on the watch and checking if everything is 100% legitimate. I do understand that there are a lot of fakes at the moment out there, and they are extremely scary in terms of how accurate these can be. When I look at a lot of these other videos in terms of comparing super clones to normal watches, it's almost impossible without opening up the movement that these watches could be real. I saw a watchmaker on YouTube Shorts who opened up the watch and didn't know the watch was fake until he finally opened it. So that's how you know these watchmakers that are making these super clones are getting extremely close to cracking the case on these watches. That's why I believe the Rolex CPO program was an amazing thing to take out in the first place by Rolex. I saw the Rolex CPO program being more of a surefire way of consumers being able to get their dream Rolex for an okay price and also having that Rolex authenticity behind it. But when I look at the CPO program today, although they are getting these amazing models, they're still overpriced like crazy. Now, one thing I don't see as much in the Rolex CPO program are going to be a lot of these vintage models. There are older watches and older types of watches, but there isn't anything super rare out there in the Rolex CPO program at the moment, unless it's going to be more for a higher end client. Now, when I look online in terms of these regular watches, there's going to be traditional Day Dates in solid gold. There's going to be Datejust, Submariners, Daytonas, but I don't see anything extraordinary in terms of vintage or older models. Another thing I will be scared about Rolex doing is tampering with the watch in the first place. When you look at a lot of these vintage models, they have original dials that originally came with the watch. The one thing that I will be scared about Rolex doing is tampering with the watches that they do get. The moment they get in a watch, they want to make sure that everything is up to their standard, which means if the dial looks like it has some sort of patina or some sort of tropical dial, they will switch it out. What I believe Rolex is doing is keeping these parts. That way in the future, once these parts become more rare, Rolex can either decide to sell it or they can keep it in their archives. Not only that, this also leads to a tighter market. The moment Rolex starts getting these more rare watches in and they start swapping out these dials and they start swapping things like inserts within their watches, they're going to be holding the majority of these parts. Now, is that something that you want Rolex to do? Not really. What you want is for these watches to be out in circulation. That way the market can dictate how much they're worth. If someone is holding on to all these parts, like a big conglomerate like Rolex, what's going to happen is these watches are going to go up exponentially. What does that mean for the end consumer? They may not be able to get the watch that they want at the end of the day. One thing I do like about the Rolex CPO program is the fact that they will service your watch. When you're buying watches off of the gray market, you don't know if somebody just bought it and then decides to flip it to the end consumer or flip it to another dealer, and that dealer flips it to another dealer, and then that dealer flips it to a consumer. It touches a lot of hands versus when a Rolex CPO ends up getting these watches, they service it themselves. They make sure it's 100% authentic for the end consumer to be able to get a watch that they're gonna love. Now, the only thing I don't like about it is the fact that Rolex will be changing out these parts. If the insert is not up to their standard, or if the fluted bezel is not up to their standard, they will change out these parts. That's the only thing that I wish the Rolex CPO didn't do. At the end of the day, these watches hold a lot of character, and if you're buying a pre-owned piece, whether or not that it is going to be polished or not, I bet you will want your original parts that came with the original watch. Another thing I do like about the Rolex CPO program is the fact that you will not get a stolen watch. There's a lot of things going on in the world right now. People are desperate. They will take a watch off of somebody's wrist. I've seen it in London where people will ride around in motorbikes and they will pull over, take whoever's watch it is, and then they would leave. There's a lot of these watches that are currently going out in circulation. And meanwhile, yes, a lot of the people that do have these watches do have some sort of insurance on them. There are stolen pieces and stolen goods, which means the police could, and theoretically, take it back from the end consumer or from the dealer, whoever has the watch in the first place. That's why box and papers is so important. Now, when it comes to vintage pieces, I don't believe box and papers is such a big deal, but when it comes to something newer, I believe box and papers should be a staple when it comes to purchasing watches like this. Now, does having the box and papers 100% mean the watch is not stolen? No, they could have easily stole the box and stole the watch. But at the end of the day, you know it's not some off of somebody's wrist off the side of the road where they just pull over, take the watch, and they run. When you're going through a Rolex CPO, you won't get a Franken watch. They go through everything. They will change out parts if they need to change out parts, and at least you know they're going to be genuine Rolex parts. There's a lot of gray market dealers out there that are currently changing parts with aftermarket parts that are not Rolex. And that's a big issue. You want something that is going to be 100% legitimate and 100% when it comes to the movement and when it comes to the watch itself. Do your research. I would personally not be buying from the Rolex CPO program. I do believe these watches are extremely overpriced for what they are. Yes, Rolex goes A through Z with them, but if you get a proper gray market dealer, they will go A through Z for the watch as well. And not only that, when you're going through the gray market, you can typically just buy what you want. Rolex CPO at the moment doesn't have all of the models that they have. Yes, they do have some vintage models, some modern models, but they will not have something 100% that you will want. If you're wanting a vintage piece, like a vintage Rolex GMT Pepsi or a vintage Explorer, you are gonna have to go through the gray market. Rolex CPO doesn't have those things at the moment, and I don't know if they're gonna have them in the future either. So make sure that you get a piece that you want from a dealer that you trust and go from there. At the end of the day, the Rolex CPO program is just another way for Rolex to make money. They make money through getting the watches, refurbishing them, and selling them again at a very high markup. This is all a money game. For now, I'll catch you guys later. My name is Ricardo, and if you haven't yet, subscribe, look at my other videos.